Alright everyone, we're back again with the Dark Souls 2 crit play. This time, we are going to be looking at Lost Bastille and possibly some of the areas connected to that, but that might go into next time too. So, I'm Woody, again, and I'm here with Kai. Hi Kai.
Yeah. What's going on?
Not a lot. So anyway, on to Lost Bastille itself.
I think that from what I've seen, this is one of the more favorably received areas of the game because it is so reminiscent of the very dense and complex areas from like Demon Souls and Dark Souls that people really like.
Yeah, if every area in Dark Souls 2 is as complex as this, it would probably have the best level design in the series. Really only a few levels in DS2 kind of reach this complexity. Of Forest of the Fallen Giants, which you did and mentioned a lot of the more complex stuff in that. I think Old Iron Keep gets close too. And maybe Dranglight Castle, but I think this is pretty top tier level design for Dark Souls 2.
It's definitely on its own tier, I think, and it's especially interesting because when you go through a lot of areas in Dark Souls 2, you go through the area, and maybe there's a couple things that you don't realize or you miss, or you'll be like, oh, I wonder what that's about, and you'll finish the area and maybe you'll forget about it. Lost Bastille is really interesting because your first time, well, there's multiple entrances to the area for one, and your first time through, there's going to be so much stuff you can't reach, and you're going to be like, how do I get to that? How do I open this door? So there's a lot of things that are left scratching at the inside of your brain, and you have to revisit it later and find other methods of unlocking the stuff there. I'm pretty sure I probably still haven't seen literally everything the area has to offer. It's very, very secret-laden.
Like, I feel every time I play this, I find something new in Lost Bastille.
Yeah, it's really cleverly designed in that regard.
Yeah, and what makes it unique in Dark Souls 2 is that it is probably the only area I can think of that has two entrances that you can come to at the same time from different directions.
Yeah, and they both unlock totally different parts of the area, which is really cool. And yeah, the game literally branches off in that regard. And I found a lot of people where they're in Forest of Fallen Giants and they go and fight the Pursuer thinking that's the intended boss they have to fight to progress. And while that is, a viable option, it's probably not what the developers had in mind.
It's the route I always go now, just because I like approaching Ruin Sentinels from that bonfire a lot more. And it's not as finicky as trying to open up the blacksmith's bonfire with the exploding barrel.
Lost Bastille looks like an area ripped from Demon Souls, is what I would say.
Yeah.
It looks like if you were to do a very great-looking fan redesign of Demon Souls 1-1 in 2013, this is what the area would look like. It even the enemies feel like they're 1-1 Demon Souls enemies, and then you end up fighting rabid dogs, just like Demon Souls 1-2. It is super reminiscent of those areas. I think the boss, even, the Ruin Sentinels, it kind of goes along with, the armored knight-themed enemies in, the Demon Souls Boletaria stages. So I think that in a lot of ways this feels like a really, really strong, the Demon Souls-inspired stage.
This area features what is probably one of my favorite enemies in this game, and that's the Jailers. I love their design, I love their crazy hooked scythe spear weapon things, and they're just kind of fun to fight because they sort of have a non-standard moveset, and that they're big guys who move really fast and have like a huge range for their attack moves.
Wait.
But they're also kind of weak on their own.
Oh yeah, okay, I'm sorry, I was like, Jailers, guys with hooks. Are you talking about the
big
torturers, or are you talking about the fat guys from
no, the big mummy looking
Okay,
dudes.
right. Like two other enemies popped in my head. Right. Yeah, they're very cool. They're awesome looking. I almost wish that maybe they could have trimmed it down and just made one into like a really memorable boss fight or something like that.
Yeah, that would have been pretty cool. It's because it seems logical because despite this area being a prison, you never really fight anything that could be considered to be like the lead jailer or like the head of the jail in any way.
Yeah, I think a warden boss fight would have been pretty cool.
So this is also the area where you encounter the second blacksmith. Kind of a little bit of a convoluted path to get there. I alluded to before, it can be a little difficult to trigger the barrel to actually blow up the wall.
Yeah, that's very odd design, I think, for a Souls game. Like, I think a lot of the stuff involving him, I don't want to say it feels unfinished, but it kind of feels half realized. I don't know what was going on with how they intended you to get to him, and you can't really access him until even further in the game properly.
Yeah.
And
maybe it's one of those, if we're running off the going off the theory that this is like the beta zone, again, maybe it was some kind of weird beta thing, because like the Souls series really doesn't do physics puzzles a whole lot, and that exploding barrel almost kind of feels like it's a weird pseudo physics puzzle thing of like you have to get it to dodge and blow up or use fire when it's near the wall. It's just weird.
Yeah, I agree. And it's also interesting, like one thing you can do with Macduff, I believe. Yeah, Macduff.
Yeah, Macduff.
You can light the sconce in his workshop, and he changes positions and will actually start working, but if you don't give him the old ember, he still won't, like, do business with you at all. Like, I thought, I saw my friend had lit the sconce in his chambers, and I was like, I didn't know you could do that. I went home and did it, and I thought that maybe he would at least like sell me stuff or upgrade my weapons normally, and he still won't do anything with it.
Nope,
So,
doesn't do anything until you give him the ember.
a neat little Easter egg, I guess, but not functional. So,
And the Royal Knight enemies in this area, I find every one of these games kind of has a couple of enemies that are like this, where despite their attacks being completely telegraphed and making sense and me knowing what they are going to do, I still manage to get hit by these guys a lot, and I feel stupid.
oh, because there's like 50 of them that you fight at once.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's one particular room. You climb up the stairs, and there's like you walk over some of the debris onto like an outside area, and there's a tight bridge area that leads indoors, and you kite like 5 of those guys at once, and it's just like a mosh pit. Yeah, I think that that's one of the most annoying examples of the excessive enemy placement, which I don't find to be as much of a damning complaint as other people's do, but in some cases like that, it's really irritating, although it gets much worse further in the game.
And advancing further on into that area, I guess going one of two ways, you can get to the Ruin Sentinels.
I would say the boss with probably the best music in the game. I guess there's also Smelter Demon, which reuses the same track. But, yeah, the Ruin Sentinel's boss theme is outstanding, and the boss itself is not so bad either.
I'd have to go back and listen to the music again. It's one of those, I don't know the music well enough, like, offhand to recall what exactly it is.
Oh, it's amazing. It feels like music that you would give to, like, a hyped-up, like, named boss. But then it's given to the Ruin Sentinels. It feels really climactic. It doesn't seem like the kind of music you would apply to bosses that don't really have much in the way of notoriety or lore to the player. So
this is probably one of my favorite fights in this game. This was also probably one of the hardest fights, if not the hardest fight I had when I played through the game the first time.
Mm-hmm.
I may have died more to something else. I may have died to Vendrick more, but this gave me the most trouble, I think, out of anything in the game, including Dark Lurker and Ancient Dragon. I don't know if it was just if I had the completely wrong moveset and playstyle going in, because I was using a halberd and a heavy shield my first time through.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a really hard time with this fight. This was when I quit playing the game on the first day, was after I had fought these guys for like 2 hours.
Oh, wow, damn.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I probably died like 15, 20 times to these guys my first time through the game.
I think my first try took me... I think I beat them on, like, my third try. I definitely, like, I was playing... The servers were up and down very sporadically, so... And I didn't still grasp exactly when you could or couldn't summon people, because, I mean, You're not, like, completely hollow necessarily, because your health deteriorates over deaths, so I didn't know if you had to be completely human to summon, and I guess you do. So I wasn't summoning anyone, and I was panicking on my first 2 attempts, and once I realized, like, okay, I got this under control, beat the first guy on the ledge, then I'll fight the other 2 downstairs and just take things slow. And with that kind of mentality, I was able to beat them pretty swiftly on, I think, my third attempt.
Because I will say, there is the NPC you can summon for this fight.
Yes.
Which is Pilgrim Belclair, who is notable for being one of the only mage NPC summons in the whole game. I think she actually might be the only mage NPC. summon. She almost just exclusively uses magic.
No, there's also Thomas.
Well, he's pyromancy.
He exclusively uses magic. That's a form of magic.
It's a technicality, but no, because I feel her being a mage too is kind of important for this fight because it's kind of a cool design element. Because this is a really, really good fight for using the red eye ring on if you just want to go tank, because Pilgrim Belclair can annihilate all of them if you just tank all of their attacks.
That seems like a really good tactic, especially after they buffed up the health on the NPCs you summon. So using the red eye stone to draw enemy fire while the other characters like take them out seems like a pretty good idea.
It's still kind of of limited utility in some fights, the red eye ring, because like I know, speaking of Lost Bastille, or Sinner's Rise, I guess, Last Sinner, who we will get to eventually, is, like, that boss is, even if you have the red eye ring, Luca TL still dies quite a bit in that.
Yeah.
Just kind of because of how the Sinner's moves work.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the really wide attack range. But anyway, we'll get to her later. So yeah, Ruined Sentinels. Let's see, some more basic stuff. They look cool.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I like their little spindly arms and legs, and it's a good kind of riff off of a Souls Knight because most of the knights with shields are really big and bulky.
Mm-hmm.
And it's nice seeing like a swifter, more acrobatic one, and all their moves play into that too, with all the spins and the aerial jumps and everything.
Yeah, and they can Captain America shield you.
Yes. That's a pretty cool part of the fight. I actually really like that as a mechanic for a boss, because then of course they get faster once they throw their shields, but they can no longer defend from your long range attacks.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing that would make that better is that if after they threw their shields and embedded them in the wall, you could pick them up after the fight and get them as an item.
That would be really cool. Oh, I didn't think of that.
And for the love of God, why is not Ruined Sentinel Shield a craftable item that could be thrown like the Butterfly Shield?
Oh man, that would be something awesome. The Captain America builds, that would be something special.
Then additionally, for cool systems, I don't know if I'd call it a system, but I really like how these bosses aggro. When you get on this tiny little platform right at the start, you only fight the one of them unless you drop down or until you kill them. It doesn't really make sense from like a lore perspective. Like, I don't know why the bosses do this, but it's cool.
Yeah, it lends kind of a nice little like danger zone to the rest of the arena, because once you figure that out, you're like, oh crap, okay, now I have to fight on like 10% of the area and be very careful. Unfortunately, the bosses, I think they're really well designed in that even when you're fighting two of them at once, it doesn't feel unfair. So fighting it is definitely like a test of real estate management.
It's a test of patience, I would say too, because definitely when you're fighting the two of them, you really have to be patient to get your good opening and not get greedy. Mm-hmm. Because getting greedy in this fight is how you will die every single time. And I think this is why, maybe, I didn't get frustrated dying a lot of times to this boss, because almost every single time it was like, okay, nope, I got greedy, I tried to get one more attack than I should have, and that's why I'm dead now.
I think that summarizes about 90% of my deaths in Dark Souls. Occasionally I'll be like, what is that bullshit? But usually it's like, I'm like, I should not have tried to attack.
There's this thought process I have way too much of when the boss has like 5% of its health bar left, and I'll say, it's okay, I can be aggressive because they don't have a lot of health and I'll kill them before they can do anything.
No,
and
can't be
then
aggressive.
I have a secondary thought which says, no, don't do that, because every time you do that, you get killed. And then I have a third level thought process that says, no, wait, never mind, it's fine, you'll totally kill them. And of course, 90% of the time I end up getting killed.
It's unfortunate because if you're at 5% health and the boss is at 5% health, it's like, I gotta kill them before I die, but I don't want to like make myself like more vulnerable, and usually those kind of situations don't end up in my favor, but it's pretty satisfying when they do.
Is play it safe all day, every day. If there's a problem to this fight, well, I guess I would kind of say there's two little issues I have this fight. The first is I don't really know if the Ruined Sentinels necessarily feel like they fit here. Like, this
Yeah,
area feels like it needs a boss, but they really don't feel like they belong in Lost Bastille.
I agree. I think in terms of probably visuals and most likely in terms of lore, Drangleic Castle, where you find them later, is very fitting. Lost Bastille, I'm not sure. I feel like maybe something else was intended to be there at some point.
Like, these would have been really cool as, like, some kind of, like, guards of Nishandra lore-wise or something. I could have easily seen this fight at maybe a more difficult level, replacing the dual Dragon Riders. I mean, maybe it would have been too much of a pastiche of Ornstein and Smough if they did, like, the fight in the Grand Castle against multiple Golden Knights at once. But,
I think, I mean, it would have been maybe a little pandering, but I think it still would have been cool. And by the way, I love that double Dragon Rider fight.
And then the other only real problem I have with this fight, which this might sound like complaining, but I've ran into it a couple times, is sometimes when you're fighting them down in the lower level, they can use a combinations of attacks that are almost nigh impossible to dodge.
Oh,
And
really?
it's just kind of it's not really like that they're planning to do it in terms of AI. It's just that their AI both happens to select an attack that's really hard to avoid, and if you just so happen to be in the wrong place of the room, it's kind of like, well, I'm eating this.
Yeah.
And specifically, I guess I'm talking about the little whirly hammer thing they do, which is if both of them do it at once, or all three of them do it at once, and you're in the wrong spot of the room, there's basically no way to avoid that, because it just eats through your stamina and hits you pretty much no matter how much you have.
Yeah. I feel like that is almost always going to be some kind of side effect of any boss that should be threatening, is that I think that if a boss is going to be tough, there has to be some degree of bullshit the player might have to put up with. I think that's just fact of game design.
It doesn't deal an overly large amount of damage, but I still think it can feel cheap sometimes. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like, I've played this boss a bunch of times. I played this boss like 3 or 4 times in the last few days for various playthroughs, and there's always kind of moments where like, oh, don't do that at the same time. Don't. Please. So, anywho, the other weird thing about beating the Ruined Sentinels is then there's a million hidden walls in this room.
There are a lot of hidden walls, yeah. You could access them, I guess, while fighting the boss. I wonder if they would provide any kind of advantage if you manage to decide.
I've considered that before, but I've never actually tried it. And additionally, the other thing about this room, which I have never seen, I have heard mentioned before, is that if one of the enemies hits the giant iron door with their shield, then they will break it down and it turns into a fog door. So if you die, you can enter through that way.
What?
I have heard that from a source that I cannot remember it, but I believe it to be reputable. In my head, it could have just been a crazy, wild rumor, but I've never seen it happen, but I really want it to be true.
That would be so cool. That's like some Metal Gear Solid shit where people discover it like a month after the game comes out.
It's Mew under the truck levels of, like, this could be true, but and it's so hard to actually get it to trigger, so it's really hard to test it, because you have to fight the Ruined Sentinels until one throws a shield at you and happens to hit the door.
Yeah, man. Huh.
To look that up at some point.
Yeah.
Continuing further into Lost Bastille, you get your bonfire here, in the servants' quarters, and then you start to encounter my favorite enemy type in the game.
I thought that was the jailers.
Everybody's favorite enemy type in the game, the exploding zombie butthole men.
Yeah, I actually do like this enemy type.
Really?
I do. Mainly because I think they are an interesting form of glass cannon, and I really like that, especially in later areas, they really force you to consider your locations and your awareness, where you are, because I don't think they're cheap. and you can hear them like it when you hear
You
that
can hear them from a
clicking.
mile away.
Yeah, when you hear that clicking, it kind of you immediately start playing differently. And I just think the fact that they instill that kind of caution and just complete like playstyle altering in the player is really cool. Not many enemies in these games do that.
What they do is cool, I guess. Like, I can see what you're saying. I would have liked them more if when they attack you with their exploding, if they just died
Oh, they do
and
later.
didn't repeatedly attack you exploding. Yeah, and they do it later on. But I don't like the ones that repeatedly attack you, just because it's depending on what weapon you're using and what build you have, they can attack you faster than you can recover. Like if you have heavy armor and like halberd, I know my first time through the game, um, it's like there's about a tenth of a second window you have to like get up and actually get a hit in
Yeah.
before they'll just explode again. So you basically have to have perfect timing.
I ran with a halberd like pretty much the entire time on my first playthrough, and I don't recall having too much of an issue with them. I like that they can repeatedly attack you, like the ones with the weaker explosions. You know, they can attack you over and over again.
And I guess it's more the annoyance of just having to fall down every time, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's a good consequence though. I appreciate that they're kind of an innocuous sort of zombie-looking enemy that do a really weird thing, and you have to alter your playstyle substantially to account for it. Kind of like the mages you fight later on in oh my god, Shrine of Amana, which again everyone hates. But I like that area, so.
I actually really like that area too. It's probably one of my favorite areas of the game.
Mhm.
So you fight all those guys, and that pretty much leads you. Well, there's Strait of Olafus at the top of the tower, but we can't actually free him at this point yet. So I think we'll talk about him later. And he's an NPC,
Yeah,
so
that's true.
so we'll
Very
talk
cool
about him at
NPC.
another point in time. But anyway, so you defeat them. You advance up this tower thing. There's a million other shortcuts and hidden walls off to places.
Mhm.
And you get up to your big bridge and you go across to Sinner's Rise, which is for some reason a different area. But as for the rest of this area, I think we're going to go ahead and cover it next time. Cutting this one a little bit short, but we'll get to everything else in this area, including Belfry Luna and the Lost Sinner and more of Sinner's Rise.
Mhm.
And that'll be next time. Now, if you liked that, you might want to check out our crit play for Resident Evil 4. It's not with Kai, but it's the same format, so if you liked how this video worked, you might like that one too. And if you like Dark Souls, we have a full LP for the original Dark Souls, which my friend goes into playing blind, and I kind of guide him through it. And we also have an ongoing LP for Dark Souls 2. Kai also runs a few Dark Souls related things online, and I've tossed some links in the description of this video where you can check out his stuff.